obviously the area, the buildings, the mental hospital bit, the local council's got it now. They're making it to houses, I think, a little hall or something. I don't know. But I think they should just keep it as what it was. They opened the place for viewings, like people walk through. This is where like people were kept. This is where this was. This is where that. This and that. And little like pictures here and there, and little viewing galleries of what used to happen inside.
My uncle used to work here as well. When he was he's a mental health social worker. He's got a lot of clients here. He's got a lot of history. You know, everyone knows about this area. You know, when they want to say, "Oh, where do you live?" or you know, say Clements, make it into a community centre. Yeah, whatever, for prayers, whatnot, whatever. I think a couple of weeks back, what's his name? Danny Boyle. He held a little event here. We came along.
Housing is probably the best thing because it would suit the nature of the area that it's in.
Yeah, it was a workhouse years ago. Yeah. All I know. Then it finished up. How can I say? A drug rehabilitation sitting there, a nervous breakdown. I was in there myself, so.
I've heard someone called me up and said, "Oh, this guy has died," which his name was Pradeep Devnath. And he was a very close friend of mine. And then suddenly he lost a bit. He came to the hospital. And then what basically happened is actually the guy who was inside the hospital, another roommate or someone, he was another patient basically, and he actually killed my mate. There was a time when I come here for an interview, because I wasn't well at that time, back in 2005. A year later I recovered, but when I actually went to the building, the rooms, the way it was done up, and I didn't feel comfortable.
I was in St Clements when I was 15. Depressed, seriously depressed. I was in there twice. It wasn't very nice. I was depressed, so it was pretty primitive compared to nowadays. But I remember it being like on the walls with loads of sort of people who were insane.
He ended up in St Clements being treated as a kleptomaniac, but he still come out the weekends, and we'd mix with him, and you know. We'd go, he was in his late teens then, 16, 17, 18, but he was serving a sentence by the courts in St Clements as a kleptomaniac.
St Clements Hospital, Bow Road, 1849, and the architect was Richard Tress. It was opened as the City of London Union Workhouse. It became an infirmary in 1874 and was expanded as a hospital by the LCC from 1932.
They had to find a name, so they took a name that was associated with the city. And St Clements is one of the churches in the city. So.
When I first started working in there, I was a little bit nervous because being psychiatric, I thought, oh, I wonder what sort of patients they are, you know, and will you be safe? When you went there for a job, you used to go to the main wing, ring the bell, and then they'll come down, open the door, and you'll go through that door, they'll lock it up. You go a bit further down, and I'll go for another door, and then they'll lock it up. And then he wants to make a note of all what you've gone in with, like how many screwdrivers, pliers, cutters and everything. So used to go through, then do whatever job you had to do, and then come out and go through all the procedure again. But they had padded cells there for the more secure, you know, patients that were in a bad way. Years ago they used to have toilets outside at the back of the hospital in the grounds, which was very rarely used there. It was all barren, and they lost a patient. They either made a break for it and went and hid in these old toilets at the back. I think they were searching the ground, searching everywhere. Eventually they come across him and he was dead.
Entering, I was quite impressed. It's like going into a country house, really. And you come down the corridor, and then you see this fine staircase that goes up and goes round. And then the offices were quite nice places. The patient's memory around here was that St Andrews was the poor law hospital, you know, where people wouldn't go into because you didn't get properly treated. So you only got proper treatment at the London Hospital and Bath. In St Andrews, you went in there and they did nothing and then you died. What I remember at St Clement's, the padded cell. The other place was a kind of cell. It was on the outside, but there was another room that faced out onto the yard, and it was quite narrow, and it had a door on it, could be locked. And it was pointed out to me as being a place where people were confined when they were misbehaving. There's really quite a lot of psychiatric emergencies, and people come in all states, being brought in by the police. And the idea, of course, is to try and reduce the severity of their symptoms. And the way we did it, really, was by injections of, I've even forgotten the name of the drugs, Majectil, I remember, and Largactil, of course, we used a lot of Largactil. And electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, used an awful lot of that. It's got a very bad name now, but it's quite good for reducing the symptoms of acute mania, you know, and suicidal depression. It's a lifesaver for some people, it really is. And that was a regular feature, the twice a week ECT session. And we used to do about 15 or 20, actually, and we'd take it in turns to do it. There was an anaesthetist to turn up, and anaesthetised people, and then we just put the stuff on. In the old days, you'd have to tie them down almost. Many people didn't mind it, but some hated it, you know. Really sort of almost plead not to have it. Dr. Denham was an interesting man, actually. Yes. He was one of these German refugees, you know, Jewish refugee. His outpatients would go on till 8 o'clock in the evening or more, and his ward rounds would go on forever. So, you know, you'd start the outpatients at 2, and at 8 o'clock you might be lucky if you finished. And he was a bit of a maverick, because he used a drug called Majectil, which was one of the phenothiazines, which were the phenothiazines were developed sort of in the 50s. Largactil, I think, was the first one, I think. And phenothiazines could treat the symptoms of schizophrenia and manic psychosis, anyway, and reduce the symptoms so as the patient was at least tolerable, you know. They weren't trying to kill themselves, they weren't trying to kill you. But they did have many side effects, and one of them was they made people, extrapyramidal side effects they were called. Oh, yeah. They made people's muscles go stiff, and they'd be shaking, and you could tell patients who were having this would sort of walk like dodos, you know. And then they sometimes had an effect on the temperature control, and you get hyperpyrexia, you know, high temperatures. And Majectil had been banned in many places, actually. It wasn't banned completely, but many doctors wouldn't use it. And he used to get people in, they'd have ECT, they'd have Majectil in increasing doses, and what I found was, when I went to the next mental hospital, at St Clement's, you could, I mean, whether it was right treatment or not, I don't know, but you could reduce the symptoms of acute schizophrenia or acute mania within a week. When I went to one of the county mental hospitals in Basingstoke, it would take 3 months. And they used ECT, but not as much. They didn't use Majectil.
He was rather tragic, because when he retired at 65, sort of,
he got killed in a road accident.
He got killed crossing a road, actually.
Yeah, I only ever heard about that. I never saw anything written about it. The thing about mental illness is, for the person who's mentally ill, it's horrible. You know, it's full of fearful anxieties and horrible noises and voices and but of course, unless you've got the mania, then of course you think you're going to conquer the world, and you try and do conquer the world. I remember one of those chaps who was sort of about to jump into the river. I think he was on the parapet of the Tower Bridge, and I remember this particular young man, he said to me, well, I know what you can do, you can say, I've got to stay here. But in fact I said he didn't have to stay, because I thought he'd got over his psychosis, but you know, sort of warned him. And I remember once a young woman came in, and I forget her name and I forget what it was about, but she was probably schizophrenic. And she began to get more and more violent, and then she began to break the room up, you know, bash the chairs and ashtrays, and those days there were ashtrays. And I was not sure what to do with her. I was trying to calm her down, but the nurses knew. They were outside. Get out, doctor, get out, doctor. And in the end I thought, well, I couldn't really do anything to stop her. She wasn't touching me. She was going around me, bashing things around me. So I got out, and then when I got out, the nurses got in and restrained her. I think she went in the padded cell. And then given an injection of paraldehyde or something. But I do remember one tragic case, actually. It's sort of unbelievable, really. The ambulance brought in a woman who was unconscious, a West Indian woman, I think. And she came in with a section, the 3-day order to be confined to a place of safety for the purposes of observation and diagnosis. And she was completely unconscious, and the doctor, the GP who sent her in, decided she had a hysterical fugue, playing at being unconscious. So when people are hysterical, they're not actually playing, they can't help what they're doing, but it's just an extension of, you know, they're in a serious state of emotional disturbance, and they react to it. She had diabetic coma, actually. What I tried to do was put a drip up for her before she went to St Clement, to London Hospital, instead of just sending her there. Anyway, I couldn't quite manage the drip, so we sent her to London Hospital. She died. A lot of people just couldn't manage.
Stress.
They weren't manic, they weren't depressed, they weren't schizophrenic. If they were depressed, they weren't that depressed. But life was difficult for them. And I remember quite a lot like that. There was one girl, quite a young girl, who used to say, she was an outpatient, I can't work out whether I'm depressed or I've just got the ump.
One of the things I remember about St Clement's when it was functioning, of course, you used to see people walking around in their pyjamas. And they liked kind of heavy wandering out.
Yes, and you'd see they would stand in the bus queue more than once.
And then you'd see a sort of a nurse, a male nurse, very often rushing out.
Yes, but I, you know, even years after I finished working there, I remember seeing someone standing in their pyjamas, and I just went up to them. Come on, you don't want to be here. Come on, and they just walked back. I walked back, and I took him up to the gate. He's just been out, see, and that was it. And another time I remember seeing someone, I was in a hurry to get somewhere. I was going to some do, I think. And I saw a patient running down the road, I think, and then got to the bus queue. I forget exactly. Anyway, I said to him, come on, you don't want to do that. And then I thought, I haven't got time to take him. So I went up to a taxi and I offered the bloke £5. I said, would you take him back? If I give you £5, will you take him back to hospital? I'll do it for nothing, he said. And he went round. So that was the sort of thing you used to see. And of course they jumped in front of the trains too, regularly. Yeah. That was quite a common thing. They get into the station, they jump in front of a train. Getting people to realise that what their problem was, you know, and that it wasn't their landlady, or it wasn't their headaches, or it wasn't their husband, or if it was, you know, they were very depressed and needed something for it.
So St Clement's, though, was all physical sort of psychiatry. They didn't go in for the psychotherapy.
No, psychotherapy wasn't around.
They did that a bit more at the London.
Yes, I think they did actually.
I was on placement at St Clement's. I actually was there for 6 months, working across several areas, acute admissions and older people's services. and I loved it. I got off the bus opposite St Clement's, walked through the gates and felt very comfortable, and I thought, this is where I want, this is the kind of place I want to work. And so it was back to St Clement's 3 years later to be deputy head there. I thought it was quite lovely actually, because it is an impressive building, and it was probably slightly better maintained than in those days. And it was interesting. It was interesting because it was a big site, and it had everything. Pharmacology has moved on enormously in the time that I've been involved in mental health, and the drug treatments are vastly superior. I mean, some of the drugs did awful things to people. There were patients who everybody in the hospital knew, you know, people both receiving services and staff. It was a community. There might have been some awful things happening, not everything was brilliant at all, but you did know everyone from walking in. You knew the porters, you knew all the porters, you knew most of the staff. The people that you probably didn't know were some of the more rotational staff, some of the junior doctors who would move through. But on the whole, you really knew the community there, and you knew a lot of the people who were being treated there as well. You know, as you work there, you realise it wasn't fit for purpose. It was not fit for purpose. It wasn't, the fabric of the building wasn't what it should be for people, really. Most of the stories that you hear, you know, are gallows humour. I mean, you always knew where there'd been suicides. You always knew which cubicles had had bodies found in them hanging. We had a lot of interesting areas, and we used a lot more applied activity in those days. So we had a wood workshop, which was great, and it was a great way for men to engage. We also had, we used a lot of creative therapies. We used art, pottery as therapeutic media. Not for displaying, but actually in terms of exploring people's psyche. The ones that actually I remember most vividly were a group of young people who were probably around my age, because I was a slightly mature student, and there were about 3 or 4 of them, and they were young black kids really, I suppose. And I met them throughout my career. You know, they never actually moved totally out of the system, and a couple of them became more and more ill. And when I met them, they were such young, vibrant people, and you just really hoped that they would get a life. But I think part of what working in the East End of London, certainly in those days, what it taught you was that people were not just impoverished internally, they were impoverished externally. And you know, yes, you could use treatments, you could build people's confidence up, you could do work on self-esteem, and you could give them, you know, make them feel confident in their skills and managing a budget in a kitchen or whatever. But actually, if their life was really empty and dreary, and they had no money, and they had friends who were perhaps within a drug culture, it was really hard for people to sustain any of that, so they'd come back through. And that was a sadness actually, to keep meeting that group of people. The intense poverty, I think, didn't help, but it was something about people were internally impoverished as well. Sometimes it was quite hard to keep working. Everybody had their supervision and had access to a support, a psychotherapeutically led support group, because I just don't think you can continue to work in those kind of environments without actually having something that's allowing you to reflect and is quite supportive and nourishing. But a different side of my work at that point in time was actually the social club, because obviously that wasn't therapeutic, it was a social club. The Friends of St Clement's, always affectionately known as the Fiends of St Clement's, who were really driven by Myra and a woman called Lottie, who sadly is not as well as Myra is. They were fantastic ladies in that they just poked and prodded and they didn't stop. They were just very maverick. You know, they just are the kind of people that make a difference. And when Hyacinth came, she just really galvanised the place. And Hyacinth was such a breath of fresh air, and you know, the way that she related to people, because she didn't have to think about a therapeutic relationship. She just responded to people as people. Hyacinth just didn't have any nonsense, you know, if anyone was trying to bring in drugs or anything. She just dealt with it really straightforwardly and effectively. In terms of psychiatry and the science of psychiatry, is still very junior in terms of medicine, I would imagine. So yes, I mean, in a way, the medications were blunt instruments. And one of the things that they might well do is remove positive symptoms, but leave people with what we used to call the negative symptoms. So although you might actually stop people from hearing voices or having delusions, what you also did was take away a lot of their personality, take away a lot of their energy, so they'd be quite flat. And that's not something you see with current day medication. Occasionally you see people walking on their toes, and that was the result of long-term medication, and it was irreversible. That was one of the beauties of St Clement's, was the amount of space that there was. While it wasn't, some of it wasn't particularly good, you did have a lot of space to do things. I really liked the big entrance hall with the black and white tiles and the pillars. I liked it, and I had an office in there. I was up in the tower for a short while as well. I liked it up there. The boardroom was lovely. Actually, it was gorgeous. It was a proper old boardroom, so that was lovely. And I liked the little garden that's actually next to the Standing Wentworth Hall. One of the philosophies of OT which drew me to it was you can't do it to people. You have to do it with them. So they have to engage, or you can't do it. It's not really about St Clement's, but I know because my route would take me along Whitechapel Road and Mile End Road to Bow Road, I know my heart would sink if I passed Mile End Tube Station. The gates were closed, because you know that it was somebody had jumped in front of a train, and it was very likely to be somebody you knew.
I had an interest in mental health. I was interested in what we called then radical psychiatry. So I was interested in alternatives to kind of standard treatments, I suppose. I got in the involvement in radical social work. That's how they use the growth of group work and that sort of thing. So I suppose that explains how I got involved in St Clement's. St Clement's, of course, has been here a long time, and I was aware of it, but hadn't had many dealings with it. I just heard kind of negative things about it, not providing very good care and so on, and being a revolving door. But we set up the People's Health Inquiry in Tower Hamlets as part of, I was the worker for the health campaign, funded by the good old GLC, and we decided we needed to find out more from the local people, what their views of the health situation. So we organized this public inquiry into health, and one of the people who came along to one of the public sessions was a woman whose husband was a patient at St Clement's, and she went every day to the hospital to meet his personal needs, because she didn't feel they were being met at the hospital. Food, laundry, all that personal sort of care. And she was very concerned about conditions at the hospital. So we found out that there had been a Friends of St Clement's Hospital years ago, and it tended to be people who didn't live in the area. And people described them as ladies in hats. We decided to re-establish the group, and we couldn't find the constitution, so we dreamt up a new constitution and kind of launched it. That's interesting that it attracted some people who worked in the hospital, but began to attract the service users, which was quite radical. I mean, the Friends organizations didn't have service users, especially in psychiatric hospitals. And one of the things we did from the Friends of St Clement's was to get, by talking to the patients, they said, what we need is something, the staff have a social club, why can't we have a social club, sort of thing. So we got some money and got the agreement of the hospital and to use this building called the Wentworth Stanley Hall. And we needed somebody to run it, and that's how we got in touch with Hyacinth. It was controversial because, as you know, St Clement's is a very open side. Wentworth Stanley Hall is a building all on its own, with access to the grounds and to the public, really. So people could come and go pretty much as they wanted, and there was a lot of controversy about people using drugs, bringing drugs in, drinking in the grounds, and coming into the club with drink and so on and so forth. So we had a bit of a struggle with some of the staff. Anyway, in the end, the NHS took over the funding of the social club, and it still exists today at Mile End. So it became, and the woman who came to the public inquiry became the first chair of the new Friends of St Clement's. It was the psychiatric staff who mistrusted us not us specifically, but the club as being a kind of hive of unhealthy activity. Made some links with complementary therapists or holistic therapists in the area. And mental health service users ask for complementary therapies a lot. So we got them to come into the hall. The system doesn't accept holistic therapies, the professionals, because there's no evidence base. They did have OTs, and they were the kind of the best part of the service. Some people will tell you, one person who was a patient there told me if it hadn't been for the OTs, she would have been in real despair being a patient there, totally reliant on drug therapy. The OTs were really crucial to the success, and they actually took on the employment of Hyacinth became one of their employees. And there are lots of stories about people wandering away and getting lost and not being able to find their way back. And so there's always been a terrible stigma about the place. And it's kind of faded grandeur, you know. Everybody knew it had been important once. And of course, being a workhouse, and the history's not very good. So I hope the buildings can be treasured somehow so that they, and I hope that the experiences that people had there can be used in a positive way to help other people. But I think the Community Land Trust is really good news for the buildings, isn't it? They're going to try to look after the side.
It was part of everyday life, going to St Clement's. Not for me, but hearing that the family were going to St Clement's, like to see my dad, or Dad had an appointment. Where's Dad? Oh, he's gone to St Clement's. And sometimes I would go with him, but I'd have to wait in the car. They would never let me go in there. My idea, because not ever going, I went when they had things like fetes. They used to have the most wonderful fetes. You know, you'd come back with solid silver teapots and things, you know, really wonderful fetes. They really did go all out, and I could go then of a Christmas. But I never actually saw wards or what went on with the people in there. So I have this vision of being in that hall and knowing that that's how it was, you know, with all the colours and the chains and things they'd have up. But I didn't know what it was like to be in there or to visit anyone in there. So I had my own picture, and that was horrendous. You know, the tales that I heard of it was horrendous. I don't know, you know, what is the truth of it really. But Dad had been in there when I was 2. I don't remember that, obviously. It kind of was just always there. The first time I remember him being in there, we came home from Christmas shopping, me and my mum, and there was a policeman on the doorstep to say that he'd tried to commit suicide. Then just didn't see him for months and months and months and months. He was in there. This is sort of like all made up in my mind, if you know what I mean. This part is that I cannot watch, when I say I cannot watch, I have watched several times, The Railway Children. At the end, here I go, at the end where she says, "Daddy, my daddy," and she runs to him. That's exactly what I'd done. I hadn't seen him for so long. My mum's brother was babysitting for me. I must have been ever so little. It was before my sister had kids, and she had kids when I was 7. And we had 2 rooms then, and I was sitting in the back room. It was a winter's night, and my mum and her sister had gone to visit him, and just was expecting them to come home. And my mum come rushing through the door, and she said, "Rhoda's brought him home. We're not having him in there no more, he's coming home." And she had a box in her arms, a cardboard box with his stuff in. And he came in, and that's exactly what I'd done. "Daddy, my daddy," and run up and put my arms around him. And he was just vacant, completely vacant, non-responsive altogether. He'd had something like 21 lots of ECT, which I know now you're only allowed 3, aren't you, nowadays? But he'd had something like 21. That could be the wrong number, but that's what I remember, that he'd had 21 lots of ECT. Quite a high priority case, I should think, because he had a regular appointment with the doctor at St Clement's every Friday for years and years and years. I remember the doctor was Dr Denham. They always used to say he's going to see Dr Denham, and he didn't have to wait in the waiting room or anything. He could go anytime. So he wasn't supposed to drive, but he'd just drive himself there, and then he'd park up round the back by, there's a little bridge that goes over by St Clement's Way. He'd park up round the back and say to me, wait there while I just go in the hospital, and he'd go in, and then he'd just come out, and that was it. So they'd see him, as soon as he walked in, they'd see him straight away. I don't know who we were with. I was a kid, and it was night time visiting, and I went with my mum and someone else. I don't know where I went with this other person while Mum went in there visiting, but we were around the area and we must have been waiting for her to come back, because obviously I think that must have been why she had to go on a train, and she didn't like going on a train up there of a night time to visit. And it was just so dark. She brought him home because there was a man in there who really just didn't like my dad, and kept going for him all the time. And then on this night that they'd gone to visit, Dad was locked in this room so that the other man couldn't get at him, because sometime during the day the man had attacked my dad with a knife. Didn't get him because they'd pulled him back, and they said no, we're not leaving him in there. And that's when he came home. I don't know why I have a vision of the doors being orange. He was, unless I think it's in my mind, so I think I must have heard them say that he was locked in this room, and there was a little square of glass that he could see out, and the door, it was painted orange. It's like a communal room when she visited him. She didn't get time to sit on her own with him, and you know, people would be shouting and screaming and just running havoc, really. I know she used to get ever so upset when she went away that having to leave him in there, but he was obviously a danger to himself, because I know he tried. I can remember he tried to throw himself under a train at Upton Park Station, and then when we were in the market, and it stayed with me always, even when I was married and had kids and didn't live near here, and I knew that Dad didn't go out, you'd hear that the trains had stopped somewhere, or that there's a disturbance on the line at such and such, and my mind would straight go to his throwing himself under a train at Upton Park Station, and it's held up everything all along the district line or the circle line or whatever.
I don't know if it dreamt it or it happened, but I vaguely remember people walking about with chains around their ankles in a line. I don't know if I dreamt it or it was true, like, you know. I used to fight all the male nurses. I just used to hit them, like, and like me. I thought I was Jesus Christ sometimes. It was ridiculous. I don't know why I thought I was Jesus Christ, and I felt safe in there. I felt safe in this moment. I didn't want to come out. 3 months when I was 23. Okay. And I had 12 ECTs. Didn't help. The medication in those was a load of rubbish. They just used to knock you out. I think I had a lie test in there as well, a lie test. I can't remember what it was for, but I'm sure I had a lie test. I went in there again about 15 years ago because they was taking me off my injection and put me on another one, and they went to observe me like that, to coming off the injection. But those were lying in bed, people. When I was in there 40 years ago, you wasn't even allowed to lie on your bed in the daytime, let alone lay in bed all night. Because we used to have to go to occupational therapy. I used to do woodwork. I made weave baskets, and there's a woodwork class next door, And the ran me in the way, banging and banging and banging, and everybody was shouting. It was a madhouse. I thought, bloody hell, it's supposed to be occupational therapy. It's supposed to help you. I think my grandmother was in there in the 20s. I think she was in there when they was destitute, and because my grandfather wouldn't work, he was lazy, he wouldn't work, he wouldn't keep his kids, right? And my mother had to go to a home in the country when she was a child with her brothers, and I think my grandmother, she was pregnant and she had to go to St Clements where it was a workhouse because they got flung out their house because he wouldn't pay the rent. He wouldn't work and they had no money coming in. They was destitute. I think I fell in love with one of the nurses. I used to have to go to work. I'd wake up in the morning and I could hear people talking to me saying, killed another. And I thought it was good. And I'd do a day's work on that. I'd go out and do a day's work. I tried to commit suicide when I was about 25. I took overdose and they popped me out in the Bethnal Green Hospital. When I was in there, after the suicide attempt, I could hear the nurses laughing and talking, and I always thought they was laughing and talking about me, like that, the nurses. I had injections for 30 years at the same, it's called Modicate. It used to be antidepressant. And I had it in the arm for about 30 years. And I know some woman on it, she was in a wheelchair when they finished, like through it. And it stiffened all the muscles. But in them days, you just walked about like a zombie. I think they only made us zombies to say that we wouldn't attack people and like, you know, make trouble in the hospital. Like. Terrible. The medication was, they didn't research it, I'm sure of that. And I had 12 ECTs, electrical treatment, and that was horrible. It was my first time to have it, and there was an old chap in front of me in the bed having these, and all the curtains was pulled round you, but they said, and they was doing this old chap, and they said, he's dead, quick, do this, do that. He's dying, he's dying. So I was a nervous wreck. And it was horrible, they put a needle in your vein. Oh, it's terrible, and you go, you're gone. And you wake up with a headache. And they come round with a cup of tea and tell you to go back to work. Because I never got married. I went bald at 17, and that didn't help. I've only had prostitutes. I've only had prostitutes. I never made love to a girl that I really liked. Just prostitutes. And if I go to the toilet, in a man's toilet, if a bloke was standing next to me, I couldn't go. I go in the cubicle. I think I put it all down to him who macrobated me with a knife like that. I told the psychiatrist when I was about 60 years old.
Crikey. And
told my mother. And she said, was it me brothers? She said, was it me brothers, like my uncles? When I was a kid, I used to go to the Scouts. And that's what happened in the church hall, right? The church hall. Yeah, I was 7 years old, and he said, if you tell her to live where I'll knife you. And that didn't stop me telling, but I thought, if I told me Dad, they'd kill him. And in them days, they own you. Murder. I used to call it Heartbreak Hotel, because there was some woman in there, I remember, she was really young, and she had the children taken away from her because she was in the mental hospital. And I can still remember screaming, crying, because they took her children away.